Welcome to CGN Live Career. Tonight's episode is called What's Your Idea of a Dream Job? My name is Surabhi Lal, and this is the last of a three-part series on career exploration. We've previously focused on your aptitudes and interests and on skills development. We invite you to look back and watch those recordings. We'll post a link in the chat. I'm thrilled today to be joined by two experts whose companies focus on learning about jobs from people in those jobs. Taking your questions over the next hour will be Linda Calhoun, the founder and CEO of Career Girls, and Mike Marriner, the co-founder and president of Road Trip Nation. We're going to be answering your questions throughout the hour. Please use the Q&A button on your Zoom display to submit your questions. We'll also have some answers in the chat box in Zoom. And we want to get to know you a little bit. Go ahead and let us know where you're from, whether you're a student, family member, or counselor. And while you do that, I'm going to ask both Linda and Mike to tell us what inspired you to create Career Girls and Road Trip Nation, respectively. Linda, let's start with you.
Thank you, Survey. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I love talking about the origin story for Career Girls. You know, I wished I had known my particular pain point that Career Girls addresses is I was a first generation college student. And when I graduated from college, it's like, yes, I've met that goal, but it really took me a long time from college graduation till I really hit on work that was rewarding and meaningful in every way for me. And after graduation, I really didn't have women role models that had careers like the one I aspired to. You know, obviously, my family had lots of examples of hardworking women, multiple job working women, but no one that had a career like what I was pursuing. And so when I was doing that work, it was in international development and it was incredibly enriching, rewarding. And I wanted girls to understand that, and especially girls that come from backgrounds like mine, that you can have complete agency over your life and make a way in this world, have a career based on what you're passionate about and your level of educational attainment.
That's great. And Mike, what about you? You decided to get a van and drive all over the place. So, so what inspired you to start Road Trip Nation? You and your co-founder.
I don't know if it was inspiration, but more probably confusion. I think a lot of times when students go to college, they are so focused on college. My mom and dad had not gone. My mom was in school actually when I was in school at the same time. So it was like, in terms of like trying to figure out like being in college was just like a really big deal on its own. And so it's hard to think about college and what's after college at the same time. And so I was a biology major and had an internship the summer after my junior year at Amgen, a pharmaceutical company. And I pipetted Chinese hamster ovary cells all summer. And I have kind of like a distractible mindset and get excited about a lot of different things. And I think I realized pretty quickly that like being in research wasn't exactly the right fit for my mindset. And so, yeah, we were coming on graduation and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been a biology major and put a lot of time and had a lot of debt and loans and I'm graduating and I really have no idea what's the right step for me. So we thought, and I wish I would have done this sooner. I wish I would have done this in high school, but done some form of exploration. And for us, we thought, let's get in a motorhome and go talk to people across America. A buddy of mine had an old family motorhome that was, 1984 Fleetwood Pace Aero. And, it was over 20 years old. And we decided to fix it up and fix the gas tank and all the hoses and lived in it for 2 months and went across America and just like talked to people about their careers and their jobs and how they got to where they are today. And as just like a way to start broad before honing in specifically. And it was an incredible life-changing journey. And, when we look back on that road trip, it really wasn't the road trip that was like the most impactful. It wasn't even the motorhome. It wasn't even like the tour. It was really the people, to Linda's part about like the role modeling, the social capital, like meeting people, the storytelling, the learning that people were in the same shoes that we were in, they were lost, they didn't know what they wanted to do. It's not like people's LinkedIn profiles are not accurate depictions of their actual lives. Thank goodness. People get laid off, people have student debt, people fail, people deliver, pizza, and they serve coffee, and they do what they need to do. And the early parts of your journey is kind of messy, and that's a good thing. And that's not the message that young people get all the time. They think it has to be perfect, and they think that people's LinkedIn profiles are linear and perfect. That's an actual depiction in social media in general. But it was really, when you look at storytelling, like true human-centered storytelling of how people got to where they are, it's actually, messier. And that gave us a lot of peace of mind, and gave us the confidence to have a little bit of space to do what we really, wanted to do, which was ended up building Road Trip Nation as it kind of turned out. So
that's terrific. I'm struck by the fact that, Linda, you are building something that you wish you had, and Mike,
Yes.
you built something that you just had this opportunity to have a friend who had this vehicle that you could use. I'm wondering, for both of you, who were some of your role models throughout your career? How did you have some of the courage to do this?
Well, Serby, I was thinking about that, and I love that question. For me, it was two women come to mind. They were both bosses. Susan Taylor, who was the editor-in-chief of Essence magazine, then also Suzanne DePass, who was a Motown records executive and then went on to become a television and film producer. And I loved, I would read about them in magazines and stuff and be like, oh, that's so cool that they're just doing that. And they're women that looked like me, that I could relate to. And then even growing up, I loved, to the point, that Mike was talking about, stories and getting people to really share the insights, the bumps, the lumps, the warts, the accolades, and all. And I loved watching Phil Donahue interviews, and then Oprah, of course. So, those are really my role models that made me know I could do what I'm doing.
And Linda, if I'm right, these aren't people that you were seeing every day. These were people that were further away from you. They weren't kind of in your close circle. So you took
Exactly.
inspiration from folks who you didn't necessarily have a personal connection with, but you felt connected to their stories. Mike, what
Absolutely.
about you?
Yeah, I think, I always kind of like looked up to people that kind of did like two separate things. And of course, like we interviewed so many people on that first road trip that became like mentors, role models, heroes. And, one was the designer in Northern Vermont. His name was Michael Jagger, and he was the founder of the design firm that helped to start Burton Snowboards and did all like the early graphics of the snowboard industry, like when snowboard was becoming a sport. And I'll never forget, we sat down with him and he said, when you magnify what it is you believe in, the world conspires to support you on your journey. And that was something that, like, on that road trip, because it just kind of changed the way that we thought about career and jobs. And it's like, oh, instead of trying to like look for the 14 career pathways in this job, what if I kind of turned the telescope around and looked at, like, identified, like, what are the things that really I care about, that I really matter, and when you just have the courage to like focus on that and magnify it. Like, I was actually pretty shy growing up. I had a stutter. I still have a little bit of a stutter when I overthink things, but so I wasn't like a very vocal person. But it was like, I remember on that road trip, something happened on that trip. It just kind of like made me come out of my shell and just like, yeah, just kind of magnify things. I remember that quote just really stuck me. It was like, find the things you really believe in, be bold, and magnify it. And when you do that, the world somehow conspires to support you. And that was the journey of Road Trip Nation. It was like, and it doesn't matter how weird it is, like road tripping, providing these experiences for other students. That's actually ended up being what we really cared about. We cared about how impactful that experience was to us and wanting to pay it forward to other students and replicate it. And that's what we've been doing for like over 15 years, just providing road trip experiences for more and more students. And so yeah, that one like always stuck with me. So.
Well, that leads me right into my next question for you both. And Mike, maybe you can start with this one. both of you work to help young people think about what their careers could be. And Mike, you didn't even know that this was a thing that you would do. But I'm curious how that helps you drive your work. What are some of the things that you hear? But what is it about helping young people think about what might be that really drives you?
Yeah, that's like what gets me going now for sure is, I mean, the early days of Road Trip Nation, it's not like I'm passionate about social entrepreneurship and, starting organizations that, are sustainable, but also do well for other people. And I had no idea that even existed when I was growing up. I didn't know that was even a thing. I always thought like business was bad. And that's kind of why I went to science. And, but yeah, I mean, in the early days of Road Trip Nation, it was just like we had this road trip, the road trip idea. We ended up getting a little bit of press around it. We wrote a book about it, but then we started speaking on high schools all across America, a lot of which were in the California Central Valley, in regions where students didn't have a lot of visibility to role models and examples and of pathways that exist in the future of work. And the schools were buying the books for the students, but we could tell like the book wasn't really enough. Like these students didn't want to just like learn about our road trip. Like they needed to have their own experiences. And that's when we're like, that's when we started thinking, wow, maybe this could be bigger than a book or just telling a story about our road trip so many years ago. Like maybe this could be like a program or a platform for other students to build their own experiences. And that just ended up becoming a rabbit hole that we've gone deeper and deeper and deeper down for over 15 years. And that's what still gets me out of bed doing it. I'm like still fired up every day when I wake up, and every time I meet a new student road trip team that gets to go out on the road and see them when they come back, it's like, that's like, it's still hard work. It's not like fairy tale land. It's like, I'm sure the same with Linda, like you're living your dream, you're doing it, but it's still like grinding it out every day, worrying, trying to make things work really, really hard. But then you get those moments where you zoom back and you're like, whoa, here's the ultimate outcome of what I'm doing here. Like these 3 students who, have never had this opportunity in there. And so that's where like, finding things that really matter to you. It doesn't mean it's going to be like happy and joyful and fun. It's not like I'm like professional surfer surfing all day long, but it's like, but it really matters to me and it keeps me engaged and, keeps me like really focused on it,
Great. And Linda, what about you?
Yeah, well, so many things that you said, Mike, really resonated with me. I mean, my happiest place on earth is when I'm in a role model interview and I've got this incredible woman in front of me and I'm asking her to tell us, what she does and how she got there. And how can anybody watching the interview make their own way or their own path forward? And so, my work really centers around women role models to help close the imagination gap for girls. I mean, I had no idea as a child, as I've mentioned before, that you could say, hey, I have a particular expertise and knowledge. This is the work that you need done, and this is what I'll do it for. And I wished I'd known sooner. I wished I had seen examples of women who were doing, a wide variety of careers and all sharing their stories. Because, I think one of the things that is our strong suit is we obviously provide the see it part of you can't be it if you don't see it, but we also provide that how to be it part. I love that we get this really granular information from everyone that we interview about what it takes to be successful in their career, but also the skills that you need to be successful in life. I find it's axiomatic. Most successful women want to help the next generation succeed. And I'm just incredibly humbled that I can reach out to strangers and say, hey, let us capture your story. And, they're doing a lot of mentoring one-on-one, but they know that if they sit with us, we would put their story on our website, and it reaches a global audience in perpetuity, and their knowledge is going to be shared, their lessons learned. So that's That's really the exciting part that drives me. And then I get to also see how girls absorb that information and the aha moments and the light bulbs that come on when they're like, oh, you can have a career doing.
That's great. I'm gonna circle back to some of the storytelling in just a bit, but you talked about the imagination gap. I know that at Career Girls, you also have a an imagination index. And so I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what those things are, and in particular, why it might be important for girls who don't have access, who or in their communities don't have access to people who are doing the kind of work that they might not even imagine.
Yeah, I think we might have a graphic about the imagination gap. And basically, it's the difference between career choices that girls imagine for themselves and the range of careers that are actually available for them to pursue based on their interest. You know, girls, particularly BIPOC girls, may not see themselves in higher paying jobs of the future, such as STEM, and they may not even know those particular careers exist. You know, that you don't get to see. I mean, when I think about it, growing up, the only STEM role model I ever saw was Lieutenant Uhura. And she was so critical. I love seeing her at that console on the Starship Enterprise. And it made it like, of course, math and science are something that I should know about, and they can be useful to me in the future. So, you know, I want to provide hundreds of Lieutenant Uhuras for girls because I didn't see them, and you can find them on careergirls.org. So, you know, I'm always looking for role models who are working in cutting edge, you know, industries and technologies, you know, just making sure that girls know early on the salient interests or issues in those fields and how they can have a career path into that. And then with the imagination index, you know, we hired experts to come up with a tool that allows us to measure the impact of what happens to a girl when they're part of our programming. So we just recently had a virtual camp that was focused on Web3, NFT, and blockchain. And we always like to measure pre and post a career dimension, and that's what you see here in this graph. And the biggest thing to take away here is that, you know, from this question, do you know the steps you'll need to take to achieve your career goals? I know a lot went up tremendously, and yes. And so, you know, I know a little disappeared. So we can see a delta from girls who participated in that camp. Then there's also a self dimension, because while you can be inspired and you see people who are doing all sorts of interesting things, how does that change you and your perception of yourself? And so one of the questions we ask that measures the self dimension from that very same camp is, how much do you agree or disagree with this statement, I believe in myself? And I love that strongly agree went up post camp, and strongly disagree disappeared. So, you know, those are just a couple of the questions, and we measure, you know, the difference of what happens for girls pre and post with our camps. You know, people ask us, well, what's the impact? You know, we can see it when we're engaged with girls directly. We definitely hear from teachers and parents and school counselors and girls themselves anecdotally. But, you know, we love being in a fact-based world. And if someone really wants us to measure, well, what's that outcome? We're ready for them.
I have one more question for you, Linda, and then I'm going to have some questions for Mike, which are, so for you, what happens around the age of 12 with girls and STEM in particular? You know, I know that you were focused on this population very specifically, but what happens to girls around this age when it comes to science, technology, education, and engineering and math?
Yeah, well, I think I go back to my Star Trek influences, because before we built the website and really crafted, who are we serving and when do we need to time that intervention, we looked at, like you do in the scientific method, we looked at existing third-party research in terms of what happens for boys and girls in terms of staying on track academically in math and science. Because, if you don't build on that knowledge, when it comes time to apply for college and then get in the whole job pipeline, you're at a disadvantage. And third-party research showed that boys and girls have complete parity in terms of interest and aptitude in math and science till about fourth or fifth grade. When girls, for cultural reasons, social reasons, start to fall behind in building on that knowledge. But if they can see women role models that they can relate to, who are utilizing those subjects in their current career, and especially if it's to benefit society as a whole, then they're much more likely to stay on track academically. So for career girls, we think of ourselves as sort of the bumpers for girls on that, in a bowling alley, on that lane, to stay on track academically, because we're showing them, hundreds of women that are using math, science, any of the academic subjects that their teachers are trying to impart, how they're using that to have agency in their life. So that's why we aim to serve girls in that fourth, fifth grade, 10 to 13 age range, keep them on track academically in math and science.
Thanks, Linda. So, Mike, the young people that you work with are a little bit older, but one of the things that strikes me from what Linda said that's true is that you are also giving the people who are part of Road Trip Nation these skills to believe that they can do it, right? That fact that they maybe never interviewed, you talked about this, you really hadn't interviewed anyone before, and then you went out and interviewed hundreds of people, and now you do that and you teach other people to do that. So talk to me a little bit about the storytelling aspect, and then also why you don't do the interviews and you ask other people to do them, and you ask young people in particular to do them.
That's a great question. Early on our first road trip, we realized that one of the biggest impact points was in the cold calling of the people and building the experience, and that we had so much more ownership over the experience because we were the ones that actually researched and reached out, and when we developed, after so many years of doing the Road Trip Nation road trips, after we had done our first road trip, we realized that we couldn't we were never going to put every young person in America on a motorhome to go find their roads in life. So we do these road trips every year that are always thematic and based on certain themes, whether it be first generation college going students, place-based like in Texas or South Carolina. We did one focused on military veterans. We did a whole road trip focused on students with learning and attention issues, learning differences. But for all the students that can't go in the motorhome on these trips, we also developed a curriculum by which students could build their own local community-based road trips, because the insight from the road trips was the same as our trip. The impact was not really the traveling and the motorhome, and the impact was the role modeling development, the social capital development, and meeting these adults and hearing from their stories, and realizing that they were in their same shoes that you were. And it was kind of like a big exhale that, oh my gosh, these adults, people that I kind of look up to, and it doesn't mean they weren't famous. One was a lobster on the coast of Maine, one was a photographer, one was a journalist, but as a young person, you're like, this is someone who's further down the road than I am, and they're reflecting on their journey. And they were also kind of confused they kind of wayfinded their way through that period. And that it's okay to be kind of going through a period of search. And we wanted the students to kind of go through that same process. We've had over 100,000 students go through this curriculum, and where they build their own community-based road trip projects. And part of the curriculum isn't early on it was cold calling. Now students don't really pick up the phone very much. It's cold messaging, so times have changed, but it's still but people are more receptive than you think. Linda talked about this, people are willing to yeah, I'll pick up the phone. I'll share my story. You're not asking them for a donation or for an internship, or, it's no, you're asking to learn from their story. And I think that's really important, that kind of non-transactional nature. And in American society, we kind of train young people to be like, oh yeah, you're always asking for something. Oh, can I get a job? Can I get this? But it's like, no, if you're just coming with like open posture of like, I'm learning from your story, people are, and what happens is that by taking that human-centered approach, you build a real rich, deep relationship. And that's what happened on our road trip. We didn't go to these people trying to like get a job or do an information, try and get an internship. It was just learning from them. And by doing that, like we built real relationships. Many of those people on that road trip became mentors for us, advocates for us, supporters of us, opened doors for us later. We didn't go into that with that transactional mindset, but we built real relationships, and social capital is one of the most important factor in people's personal career journeys. But the question is like, how do you build social capital? And how do you engineer it? And there's lots of programs out there that do that for students. But we find if you can give students the skills to kind of be in the driver's seat, literally and figuratively, and like building their own interviews. So yeah, that's been a huge part is not just setting up interviews for students. Like we can never scale that, but providing a framework by which students modeled after the road trips can build their own local road trip experiences. That's what we've seen. And that's really where we see the future of Road Trip Nation going too. It's of course, we'll always do the big green RV. We have 7 huge motorhomes. We are doing our first motorhome in the state of New York in a few months.
We should talk. You should come by.
Focused on clean energy career pathways. The state of New York has invested significantly in reskilling, upskilling for clean energy career pathways. And so we're doing a whole road trip in partnership with the state, focused on exploring those pathways. And it's in electric vehicles, which is awesome. So no motorhomes. It's a first for us, which is really cool. But still, like, how do we mobilize more students to be doing this in their communities? There are people, we had a student who went through this curriculum. We got a random email from him like last week. And he's like, just to let you know, like, I want to thank you because, 7 years ago, I went through the Road Trip Nation curriculum and I was interested in becoming a firefighter. I interviewed a firefighter in my project. And today I just went through the academy and I'm now a firefighter, And, he wasn't on a road trip. He wasn't on the PBS series, any of that stuff. He was one of the students that built this, interviewed someone in his community, and those people are all around us, And when you start looking at your community differently in terms of role models that you can talk to through the lens of storytelling, that's where it gets, really exciting. So
yeah, I totally co-sign on that, Mike. We've seen that we have Career Girls Days, which pick up a lot of the model that you talk about. We get local role models depending on the school that's hosting us. And, they're able to engage with them, ask them questions, and really drive the discussion. So we have that in person with Career Girls Days, and then when everything had to move to a virtual space, we found that we could do these virtual camps that I was talking about, the Imagination Index, and we could get experts, subject matter experts from all over, role models who could be, in conversation as the sort of first part of a virtual camp session. But then the breakout sessions is where the magic happens, in the alchemy, and where you can see girls definitely posing their questions, getting the responses and driving that discussion to learn about who that person is, how they made that their way, and what's important about the subject matter of the particular camp. So it's so true to let it be, to let students drive what their interests are, and then they can, sort of extract what they need from the resources that we put together.
Yeah, one of the things that I wonder, Mike, if you hear, is that people say, oh, well, nobody's going to talk to me, right? No one's going to talk to me if I make this call. They aren't going to tell me their story. I imagine that that's some of the fear. And by and large, my guess, though I want you to confirm this, is that people do want to talk and tell their story.
Yeah. I mean, originally we always said like the chances are 50-50. And they're definitely better than that, but that's just like to under promise, over deliver. And, but we say, look, but if you don't pick up the phone, the chance is 0. And so just by picking up the phone, you have 50 times better chance of actually talking to someone. On our first road trip, we booked some interviews with some pretty incredible people, like Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks, the director of Saturday Night Live, like, but people are like, oh my gosh, how'd you interview Howard Schultz? But they're like, no, but like so many people said no at the same time. And it's just kind of a mindset of like,
Yeah.
just going for it. If it doesn't work, like, it's okay. Like, forget it, move on, move forward, shake it off and keep trying, so that idea of like 50-50, like, have 10 people on your list, 5 will say no, 5 will say yes, but those 5 that say yes might be like literally life-changing experiences, people that can become your advocates. You might get insights that stay with you your entire life. And but yeah, part of the cost is a little bit of rejection, and that's okay too. And that's where the peer-based learning is so important, because when students see their peers also doing these cold calling and getting rejected and like being okay and kind of like having some fun with it, that's where it kind of demystifies it a little bit too. And that's why when the students see the road trippers doing it in the motorhome, it's like, oh wow, so that's part of the video-based curriculum we have, is like watching other students doing this, and they kind of make a joke out of it, like, oh, he said no, whatever, so but it is that is by far the hardest hump to get students over, is like the cold call. But in some of the research that we had done on the curriculum, that was also the part where there was the greatest self-efficacy gains. They had to like go back and reclean the data because they thought there was something wrong in the analysis, because it was like, wow, they hadn't even done the interview yet, but it was because exactly what you said, like, whoa, people actually are willing to meet with me, and I think it was students feeling like they were a little bit more in control of their destiny than they thought, that social capital and meeting people isn't just something you sit back and hope that the universe provides for you, but it's like, oh, I can actually, like, it's like a whole worldview shift in terms of I can actually reach out and people are willing to talk to me. People are willing to share their stories. And that's a really profound thing that we found.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that because I think sometimes people are really afraid at all ages to pick up the phone or to send that email or connect. And it is true that sometimes people are going to say no, but it is also true that sometimes people are going to say yes. And for those people who say yes, my guess is also that they will connect folks to other people. So, I'm one. I think that that's really, really important for folks who are listening to know, right? Which is that you have to take that chance. And Mike, as you said, it's a 50-50 chance. If you don't do it at all, your chance is 0.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it, you're at a 50-50 or maybe even better than 50-50 chance.
I have to share 2 pieces of advice. So from Suzanne DePass, I remember reading from her, I take no as a vitamin. And I thought that was like amazing advice on my journey as I was building Career Girls and reaching out to people. And, we always ask our role models for advice or how do they overcome obstacles. And, one of our role models said, well, when someone tells you no, just know that you're not going to get there through them. And you just have to find another person or go another way. So I love these really practical pieces of advice of how you don't let anyone stop you from doing what you want to do, what you feel compelled to do. So.
Yeah. And Mike, you talked about having people who really feel the sting of folks saying no, but then moving through that and having the resilience to come through that to then pick up the phone again. I'm wondering, what you got a couple of lucky breaks, Mike, when you started. What was the strangest or most surprising thing that you have ever highlighted on Road Trip Nation? And what was one of the luckiest breaks that you didn't think you would get?
One of the luckiest breaks was definitely in New York on the road trip. We and this is just a testament to like social capital and putting it out there, but when you go on a road trip like that, you just meet so many people. And one of the guys that we met, Phil Green, along that journey, knew a writer, had connected with a writer at Forbes magazine, and Forbes was like, oh, this is interesting, this is a really crazy idea, maybe we should do like an article on it in Forbes. So they, it was a tiny article, it was not like a big glamorous article, but and actually the writer didn't even believe that what we were doing was like real. We were in town, we were interviewing the founder of Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble started as like a college bookstore, so he was like, sympathetic to like college students, like, and he had this incredible immigrant story, and he just related with the college students being lost and trying to find their way, and he was willing to sit down with us. And so we told the Forbes writer that she's like, oh, I'll tag along with you guys when you're in New York on your road trip. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is like, someone thinks that what we're doing is like legitimate, you know? And so she's like, well, let's see if it's the real deal. I'll shadow you for a day. But sure enough, that morning we got a call from Len Reggio's assistant saying, Len can't meet with you. And we're like, oh my gosh, you know? And so we're like, is there anything we can do? Like, we'll do anything, you know. It was supposed to be that morning, but I didn't beg, but I kind of begged. I also learned just to like treat people's like assistants as like really kindly and like gold. People sometimes just like treat gatekeepers with like, oh, I only really want to talk to Len Reggio, so I only like talk respectfully to Len Reggio. No, like really, we were like we learned to be like super respectful to everyone up the food chain. And in that moment where he couldn't do it, you know, his assistant, you know, I had talked with her for months and she was like, I'm so sorry. She's like, I'm like, I'll be honest with you. We have like Forbes with us and they're like, don't think this is real. And I don't know what they're going to write, you know? And she's like, all right. She's like, come back at the end of the day. I'll squeeze you in. So she squeezed us in, and the Forbes lady sat in on the interview and wrote a little tiny article. But then that article got the attention of a publisher in New York, Random House. And they're like, oh, this could be a book partnership, you know? And so, and then the woman who wrote the article, we needed someone to kind of co-author the book with us because we'd never written a book before. And she ended up being the co-author for the book. So it was like, just, you know, that was like a little, you know, that was definitely, there's always luck in every story. There's definitely luck in our journey too. And that was definitely one of those moments, you know.
That's great. So I'm curious for both of you. You talk to people in all sorts of jobs. What is either one of the most surprising or one of the most awesome jobs that you've ever highlighted on Road Trip Nation or Career Girls?
Oh boy. You know, we interviewed a woman who programs robots, and Jibo is the robot. And so we were at MIT, they were hosting us. And so we interviewed her. She's talking about her career. And then she comes back and we got Jibo, the robot. We were able to do some interview questions with Jibo, and Jibo, you know, got to do jokes and some poetry and things like that. So I thought that was really a cool person to interview, and a robot.
So cool. Mike?
We interviewed so many people. You know, along the lines of Career Girls, we interviewed the founder of Goldie Blocks, which is this, I always like connected with like the social entrepreneurs, people who are like building enterprises that also had like social good. And we also interviewed this founder couple that created this like soccer ball idea in Africa where like every time you kicked it, it absorbed energy, and they could use that energy to like then plug in their cell phones to charge their cell phones, which that was just like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant, you know? You know, we also interviewed the guy who managed the Mars rover landing mission. And he was fascinating because he was like not a great student in high school. And he just wasn't inspired, wasn't into science at all. But, you know, one day he was like looking up at the stars in his 20s, and he was like, he was like, oh my gosh, how does that work? And he's like, I'm going to go take one class at community college. And he went into community college, took another class, and ended up getting his, you know, degree and PhD. And now today he's like running the Mars rover thing at like JPL, you know. And we interviewed on our road trip, we interviewed the guy who decoded the human genome, Craig Venter. And you always hear, but he's like famous guy, right? Everyone like, but he sat down and he's like, I got a D- in high school physics. And I was like, what? I mean, like a D-. The guy who decoded the human genome got a D- in high school physics. And I was like, thank God, you know, like that's like, I mean, grades are important. Yes. Full stop, you know, but it's not a death sentence, you know? I mean, like people, that's what, I mean, he went to community college. He went to Orange Coast Community College, you know, like worked at Sears at night to pay through his school, you know, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like there's too much pressure and too much of a for students that maybe I didn't perform great in high school. I kind of barely got through, and everyone learns differently. We did a whole road trip focused on learning and attention issues. We learned at the end of that road trip, they're not disorders, they're learning differences. Everyone learns differently, and school is made for one type of learning. And just because you don't fit in that bucket, you are destined to be some other great thing that aligns with your learning style. And there are other pathways and other journeys and education systems for that. So it's so not about, how you perform in school. It's really more about like finding your right path, finding something you believe in, and then getting the training. And you need some form of post-secondary training. But it can just happen in so many different ways. There's just not one cookie cutter way to do it, so.
Exactly. I have to say that's really the point that we always want to drive home at Career Girls. It's finding what you're passionate about and then combining that with education. And to your point, Mike, it's, it could be community college, it could be learning from someone else in, apprenticeships, however that shows up. But understanding that the more you know about a topic that you're really passionate about, that's how you're going to be successful. That's information, that's a message that comes from all of our role models. The first thing you need to do if you're going to be successful in life is, what do you care about? What gets you excited? What makes you want to get out of bed every day to pursue it? What's that passion? And then that's the driver, combined with education and learning more about that topic.
I would only say from talking to many people about their careers that can also change. So your passion today may be different than your passion a few months from now and a few years from now. And that's why we see people who have shifted and changed careers as well. I want to make sure that we get some questions that came in from our audience. So the first really dovetails to what we were just talking about. What would you say to a college freshman who's undecided about their major?
Undecided about their major? Well, on Career Girls, we have a college major quiz where you can, when you navigate to the website, you can select, what you're interested in, the classes that you've had in the past that interest you, and it'll suggest college majors where you can see what the course requirements are. And to Mike's point, we have interviews with college students, current college students. Some are, we've got students from Spelman, we've got students from El Camino Community College, University of San Francisco, all different schools who talk about why they chose that major, what they like about college. So, you can see the factual, these are the courses you need to take, but then you can also hear from students a variety of students who are talking about what it means to pursue that major. So that's just one way that I think we could help that freshman college student.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And yeah, it's tough because you student debt is real, and you gotta I would just choose something, and it's okay. You can change later. Like what you get I would say choose something that you're interested in. Use leveraging various tools like Career Girls, and take the pressure off thinking that it has to be the perfect major, because I majored in biology. I started Road Trip Nation, and you know what? Biology prepared me actually really, really well for founding something that is hasn't really been done before, and I mean, Road Trip Nation was like a weird organic chemistry equation. It was there's a media side, there's an education side, there's a licensing side, there's a digital side and analyze. There's so many different pieces that kind of all balance together. And, you could have said, oh, people always ask me are you bummed that you didn't major in business? I'm like, no, actually biology trained me really, really well. And so I think so many skills are nonlinear and relate in some way. And I think that hopefully takes the pressure off of what you choose. And to your point, things will change as you go. So the most important thing is actually learning how to learn and adapting later. That's why community college is such a genius treasure that people don't, appreciate enough, because you can go back, get credentials, get associate-based programs, just start somewhere, learn, adapt, continue learning, continue adapting your entire life, as things change. And the world's only getting more fluid. It's like the people that we actually interviewed a lot of people that were super successful, that were moved around a ton when they were growing up, and parents were on military bases, like that kind of thing. And it was, for some reason, there's some thread around agility, adaptability, like making new friends, like, that was like a really weird common thing. So it's just change as your friend. Don't worry about making one important decision for the rest of your life. Just choose something, get engaged, and then, it'll change later, and that's okay.
And I find that a lot of our role models say, we ask skills from childhood that you take into the work you do now. And reading comes up over and over again. And, the curiosity that's involved and that continuous learning that you were just talking about, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to invite our audience to put in some more questions. And I have one more, and then I have a many questions still, but certainly want to get other voices in this as well. What, if you all were to decide, or what are you hearing about how advancement in artificial intelligence is going to impact the career landscape? So be a futurist. We're going to be a futurist in the next couple of minutes and think about what is it that you're hearing, or what is it that you think AI might do to impact folks? I feel like, Linda, you probably have your eyes set on this.
Yeah. It's such a powerful technology. When I heard Joy Buolamwini talking about how artificial intelligence, machine learning, she could not be recognized. She's a Black woman. She could not be recognized with facial recognition software unless she had a white mask on. And when I heard that story, I just became incensed. And it's like, okay, all of the role models that we interview from that point on, we're going to make sure we interview women who are working, very diverse women who are working in artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics. It's incredibly important that the people who are writing those algorithms, sourcing the data sets, be as diverse as possible. So what that's meant for us is getting the stories of women who are currently working in those fields, presenting the different avenues for how you can influence those very powerful technologies. And again, with our curriculum that we provide, we hire teachers who prepare curriculum for the classroom, independent learning guides for outside the classroom, and fun page activities for a child to be able to do on their own, targeted for that age group that we aim to serve. And, one of the things that from our AI camp that we did last year, we had a machine learning expert in a breakout group, and we were demonstrating software that would help you draw. And there's a drop-down menu. One of the things that I was trying to draw was a fan, and I was going to do a fan that looks like this, but the software took over and drew an electric fan. And you could just see the girls understand that whoever was sourcing what a fan looks like really didn't have any experience with knowing. Now, it's not always an electric fan. I was drawing a fan that I had seen, my grandmother in church, or, that in other cultures use a handheld fan. So, the expert was pointing out, this is an opportunity for girls to understand that their experiences and their voices are needed. So the way I present artificial intelligence is, you need to be involved in this very, very powerful technology and design.
Mike, what about you? What do you think that AI might have on the future and future career landscape?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think AI and whatever comes after AI and whatever comes after that, it's like this like cascading sense of just disruptions, innovations. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's like, raising kids who are like original thinkers and entrepreneurial and creative. I mean, those are things you can't automate, and I don't know. I think creativity is just massive. New ideas, people, kids who are passionate about ideas, get excited about things, or have it's just all like they people call them soft skills, but it's like, I know I've heard people call them power skills now, but all of those social emotional skills that kind of like the building blocks behind all the stuff that will get automated. I mean, I've heard that even like computer science and like coding, by the time I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and people say coding is a great career, no doubt, but like by the time my kids become adults, like coding might be automated very easily, so yeah, how do you like get kids ready for that future? And I think the main thing is just agility, adaptability, like being comfortable with and feeling like making mistakes is okay, learning from mistakes. I mean, that's another, I'm sure that, Linda hears this too in her interviews, but like, that's another, and one commonality is like people that moved around a lot actually help them. Another thing is like just people that are comfortable making mistakes, failing forward, shaking it off, learning from that, not taking things so seriously, not getting stuck, and I do worry that like our American culture is so, and social media has exacerbated this, but everyone's obsessed with being perfect lives, perfect careers, perfect career pathways, LinkedIn versions of people's career pathways, but which is just not true. And it creates a fear of making mistakes. And when we know like, and such a huge percentage of people who we talk to, that's like actually the path, that's actually the way that people find their roads, learn insights. There's just no simple way through it. It's just really one foot in front of the other, getting clobbered, learning, not taking it too seriously, not getting stuck, going through it again. But people aren't telling those stories. That's where in Road Trip Nation, or no, on Career Girls they are. Yeah, on Career Girls they are. Yeah, just not in the lexicon of social media. I think things are changing. I mean, that's a big part of what we try to. I mean, it sounds like Career Girls and Road Trip Nation are like such like kindred spirit, like sister company.
Indeed.
Like in our we have a 10,000 video database, and in every single profile we have
16,000. Yeah.
We try to tag based on that. So now we have natural language search. So if you're first in family, go to college. If you're a dreamer, if you grew up with a single parent, if you're a first generation immigrant, we have whole verticals. And so that seems, I mean, Linda said it, but the see it to be it component, like that's really, really, really real, and kind of owning it, that's like part of your journey, and that's a good thing. And that's how you learned, and it's part of who you are. And,
but like we also focus on the how to be it.
Mm-hmm.
We're both inspiring students to think about what's possible, but then we're also letting them see real insights into, well, how would you do this? How was that path, that you pursued that got you to this point? And, you've got curriculum, we've got curriculum, things that help the stakeholders for those students, be they teachers, family members, guidance counselors, school counselors. This is how you can use this content to help that child with their career exploration and their academic achievement to go along with that. So it's critically important. And one of the reasons why I was really delighted when I had the opportunity, because I'm a fan of what you do, to be in this conversation, because I think anything that, Road Trip Nation, Career Girls, that we can provide to the media landscape, because it's not, as you said, you snap your fingers and it's a TV glamour job, or, there are real people who will share their trials, tribulations, and triumphs to getting to where they are in life. And that, most importantly, that child can do it too. There's nothing that's outside of their realm of possibility.
So I'm hearing a couple things. One is that, we have a number of people on this call. We have folks who are supporting young people. We have and the parents and guidance counselors and career counselors, as well as students themselves. And one is a little bit of room to make mistakes, and that is okay, which is as a parent myself, some days harder than others, but certainly something that you've been hearing in your conversations is that room to make mistakes is important and critical. The other piece, Mike, I heard from you loud and clear, and I certainly believe to be true, is that as AI increases, our need to continue to have those social and emotional skills becomes even greater. And Linda, you added the pieces around thinking about who is served by that technology and who is not served by that technology. So the human elements of that work is not going away. And I think it is actually even more important with AI. I have one last question for each of you, and they're going to be different as we close out. So one, Linda, can you talk a little bit about the difference between a professional role model and a mentor, and where people can find mentors or role models?
Yeah. Well, the difference, a role model is someone that can, you can look up to them. They're an example to be imitated. And you may not know them at all personally. A mentor is someone who is also experienced and a trusted advisor, but someone who is committed to helping you develop and find your path. In my experience, I spoke in this webinar about who some of my role models are. And as much as I adored those people, I don't know any of them personally. But I did have mentors along the way that saw that I wanted to advance in my career and advance as a person, who took an interest. They were sort of like my own personal board of directors. They would give me tips. They would give me, constructive criticism. They would give me tips, advice, ideas. And they would advocate for me even when I wasn't in a room or around them. So finding mentors, I think the important thing is to be respectful, open, and just really transparent about the fact that you want to learn from them, and you would appreciate, their time to be able to help you along your path.
Excellent. And Mike, two questions, both of them have a little bit to do with storytelling. One is, what are a couple of questions that young people can ask themselves when they're thinking about a career conversation? And then on the other, what are some questions that they can ask people around them to be curious? What are some of these conversations of curiosity that folks can have?
I think questions to ask yourself are just, what are the things that you really get heated up about or care about? And it can be weird. It can be super weird. It can be, it can be a road trip, or it can be stars in the sky, or it could be snowboarding, or it could be, all of these things back into really interesting life journeys. And we've seen it over many, many years, and then, so it's one part, just what is it that, that first quote that really impacted us? When you magnify what it is you believe in, the world conspires to support you on your path. And so what is it you believe in? It's and it's not always what makes you happy, drinking a milkshake or something like that. It's like what matters to you? Is it your community? Is it your town? Is it your local sports team? And then ask yourself, how can I get more engaged in that? And how can I take that next step? And a lot of times taking that next step, and taking the next step can be, if there are real resources around you, a local community college system that has a program in that, or just a person, sitting down and asking if you can take them out to lunch and say, hey, I'm a student, I'm interested in this field, and I'd love to just learn from your journey and see how you got to where you are. There's just find some way to kind of, as Linda said, go from the inspiration to the next step. And, and then in terms of if you do sit down and talk to someone, we find that the best thing to ask is just ask them where they were at when they were in your shoes. And and be vulnerable yourself. We talk a lot about like powerful vulnerability in the interviewing process, and it's the world's kind of like physics. Like the vulnerability you put out there is the vulnerability you'll receive. So if you're just if you're like, oh, I got it all figured out, like no big deal. But if you're like, I'm actually pretty confused. I spent all this money and time in college, and I had this internship and it didn't work out, and now I'm kind of starting over and wondering if you ever felt that way too. And if you did, how did you get through it? What did you learn? And not trying to be so tough and figured out and have this fake, but like actually being like, if you don't know what you want to do and you're confused, like just kind of own that too. And by being real, that is then returned, and it results in people being really real and honest and relating with where you are. And then that results in real deep relationships and people, this weird bond, that develops. And over time that, so yeah, I would not ask people things you can like learn about on the internet, like if it's on their LinkedIn profile, you don't need to ask them that question, like ask them deeper, richer questions about their journeys, their hurdles, their failures, like how they got through certain moments.
Well, I'm sure that we could talk for a lot longer, but we very much are at time. So I want to thank everybody for watching CGN Live Careers. What's your idea of a dream job? And a special thank you to our guests, Mike Marriner and Linda Calhoun. If you want to share this episode, a link will be sent out in the next couple of days. Thanks for watching and good night. And thank you again, Linda and Mike.
Thank you, Survey.
Thank you for watching CGN Live Career. What's your idea of a dream job? We'd love to get your feedback about this episode in a brief survey. By filling out the survey, you'll have the chance to win a $50 Amazon gift card. CGN School is the first video library for counselors to build capacity with their families, featuring only nationally recognized college and career experts with content translated into multiple languages. We've dropped a link to a brief video in the chat. See and hear directly from counselors who are now letting good content do more of the work. Our next CGN Live career program is on Thursday, January 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll be focusing on ways you can plan ahead and use your summer to sharpen work skills and gain valuable job experience. We hope you'll join us. Today's discussion will be posted to share with your friends and colleagues later this week with captioned translations in several languages. Thanks again for watching and have a good day.